Welcome to the AAA, the podcast where we talk everything AA from alcohol to recovery. I'm your host, Joe Van.
I'm D. What's up?
And today is step one. We admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. But before we get into our episode, we have today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Heineken. Heineken, for our Boxing Day blowout sale, each can is only $38.99. Come on quick to the LCBO or the beer store and pick up your Heineken today.
It's a deal.
Yeah. Okay, so there we go. That's how you start an episode one.
Hey guys.
So, obviously, Dee and I were talking before we started this episode, and we think it's very important to start with the fundamentals. So, obviously, we've introduced ourselves in the beginning there, but aside from that, we want this episode to be like a real introduction. So we will be talking about step one, but before we get into that, we want to talk about what even is alcoholism, right? What's the difference between just drinking and actually having a problem? Yeah. So a disclaimer is that we're both recovered alcoholics. That's why we decided to make this podcast in the first place. But also just to spread the message of, you know, what it is to be a recovered alcoholic in a society where alcohol is so prevalent. So I guess we'll start with what is alcoholism. So obviously alcoholism is, like what step one says, when you become powerless over alcohol and when your life becomes unmanageable. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be unmanageable, but when you know that you've lost control. When it stops becoming a choice, when you just have to drink.
I think that's kind of like the breaking point. It's like when you just know you have to have it, especially with like everyday things.
Especially with everyday things, you never know because, like, when you're going through, like, say for instance, like work or even just like a game, for instance, like if you're going to go play a game, like a soccer game, and you feel like you have to drink in order to like be better, you know you got an issue.
Yeah.
You know there's issues going on there. Just like everyday things, like watching a movie, for example.
Yeah.
Little things like that where you feel that
If you have to drink,
it's going to make the experience better in some way. Yeah, I remember when I was, I think I was 17 or 18, a friend of mine, the two of us went off to Toronto just to explore, and we ended up in the Ryerson campus, and we met someone there. We were smoking cigarettes at the time, and we were sitting down with someone who like asked for a cigarette, and he was just some random like older guy, and he sat down with us, and he was smoking, and he's like, oh, but you know you kids shouldn't smoke, you're young, you can still stop. And we're like, yeah, because we'd already been smoking for like 3 years at that point. And he was like, no, you don't understand. I mean, at first you just want to have a cigarette after a meal like you guys are having. And we're like, yeah. And it's like, but then it's like after sex, it's after watching a movie, it's before you go in for work, it's during your lunch break, it's after work. And it's like, it's easier to smoke cigarettes because they don't get you drunk. But with alcohol, it's really the same thing where alcohol becomes such a great thing in your life, and it becomes something that's so enjoyable. Because there's no alcoholic that starts off hating it. It's impossible. You have to like it for it to become an addiction where you want to keep doing it, and then you can hate it. But it starts off as this amazing thing, and you just, at first it's like a weekend when you're alone. Like the parents are out and you're not having a party and you just drink alone. And it's like, that was an amazing experience. And then it starts to become every single time you're alone instead of just that one time. And then it becomes, you're changing your schedule so that you can be alone to drink. And then that's obviously when you've passed the tipping point. It was before then, but it takes that slow build to get to a point where you can at least recognize that you have a problem.
And where it like fills in all of those little mini parts of like when you actually have time to really focus on what is the issue at hand, you fill it with drinking.
Yeah. It'll be a thing where it's like, okay, I finished my job today, I'm going home, what should I do with my time? It's like you didn't come up with a plan, maybe you'll watch TV or something. It's like, I'm going to drink. Yeah, it fills in every single place. You could work out, you could see your friends, you could do all this stuff, but whenever there's a place where there isn't a plan, it's drinking. But anyway, so alcoholism, obviously there are very different forms of alcoholism. There are people that are social drunks, there are people that are angry drunks, there are people that are depressed drunks, there are people that are like anxious drunks that just want to be alone. So there's all these different versions of what an alcoholic can look like. They can be super social, they can be a recluse. It's a complex issue, and that's because addiction is a complex It's just a complex mechanism of the matrix of the human mind, you know.
And everybody
Consciousness
handles it
itself is so
differently, yeah.
complicated. But yeah, everybody has their own way of getting to wherever they are in life, and you come with a predisposed hereditary condition for addiction, right? Like a lot of people have that are alcoholics. Not everybody, but I think most people. So it's very complicated. It's easy to get in. It's hard to get out. Yeah, and it's like, and everybody who gets drunk isn't necessarily an alcoholic either, right? So it's the mediation in there where if your life is unmanageable, then you got a problem.
Like you mentioned, like those everyday things, when it starts to incorporate itself into those daily things, that's when you know that you're being essentially dependent on something. And you know that there's essentially an issue, but that is the hard part with alcoholism, is finding what that issue is. And sometimes things don't work with us. So like you mentioned, sometimes it's genetics, where because you had that one experience where, for instance, you're at home, your parents went away for the weekend, you got super drunk, you had the best time ever, that high and that fun and that addiction, that is like something that could be just part of your genetics, where you get literally instantly addicted. Yeah, that literally, boom, you're in, right? But then once you start to notice that it's starting to replace certain things in your daily life, and you're really starting to kind of like even make excuses to drink, that's when you know you have to kind of really start figuring out where and when did this happen, and how you can change. And by figuring that out, that's literally when you're able to now start managing a better life.
Yeah. That's the hardest part. That's what everybody says. The hardest part of step one is admitting. Because it's not like admitting to other people. In AA, they might say admitting to God. But when they say admitting, it's more figurative. It's becoming self-aware. It's realizing that you have the problem. That's the hardest part. Because, for me, I was in denial for years and years and years. Not even in denial, but just like so deluded that there wasn't a problem. Because there couldn't have been, right? Not like, me. It's like,
essentially, how is there really a problem when we're in a society where it's so like regulated, especially for males? And I'm not saying like it's really that much different for females, but I just feel like for males, it's almost like
instead of having emotions, you drink.
Yeah,
that's a common trope in the male culture of today, and that's what causes things like toxic masculinity. Is when people aren't actually handling their emotions, they're doing other things, whether it's fighting or drinking or cheating or doing whatever, right? It's like we'll do anything to not face our emotions, and that's why like the suicide rate, I think it's like 80% is males in Canada, and it's because we just, it's like we'll do anything other than the simplest thing, like just crying or just opening up to someone.
Like that was, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but when the day that I stopped drinking, that was probably I've never cried for so long, because it was just such a turning point to like literally look at yourself and just be like, how the hell did I get here? And why have I made these decisions? But it's essentially what it does is over time you realize it's fogging all of that, so you don't have to literally look at the problems and the issues.
Yeah, it becomes harder and harder to become self-aware the longer that you're digging a hole. Or another analogy would be on a trek. It's hard to get off the track because it just keeps going. It doesn't stop. And it just, and it's like plowing itself into this fog, so you can't see anything and you can't stop, and it just keeps going. And so it's very hard to actually stop and have a moment of clarity to be able to recognize if maybe you've gone off the rails a bit and you're just like colliding down into oblivion.
And that's a great analogy as well, because in some sense, it's everybody goes through this, and that's where, for me personally, and let me disclaimer, I've never actually went to AA, so
but I have. Just in case anyone's thinking the podcast is illegitimate.
Yeah,
50% of our host base has
which
been to AA.
I think is amazing, because it's almost like people can get my perspective of, because sometimes they don't have the option, and personally I had the option, but it's more of I had the anxiety essentially attached to it. So the main reason why I was drinking so much was because of my anxiety, and because I didn't know how to socially handle certain situations, and I was stressed out. So the main reason for me to be drinking was to kind of distract all of that and not be less social, be less incorporated into those things. So when I stopped drinking, it like heightened in my anxiety and all these things where I was like fearful to like admit that I had an issue, and like I didn't want to tell people that I was drinking. Like I'm almost 3 years sober, and I think I like had just told my family like maybe like 6 months ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Because I've been alone for like my majority of my life. I've just been working.
Yeah,
nonstop.
I guess that does make it.
Right.
I guess time, disappear, and you don't realize it's been so long. Since
You wake up one
told
day.
someone.
You literally wake up one day. You're like, where the hell am I?
Yeah.
You just go. Years go by, and because you're literally on that road, like you mentioned, and sometimes in the road, it's like the weather and the storm and the fog is thick. You can't see an inch in front of you. And that's where I literally felt alone, where because I felt I'm in this thick fog and things like this. Oh, well, I'm in this thick fog. Where else am I going to go? Let's keep drinking. And then eventually I'll get out. But what you have to realize is at the end of every bad storm, there's sunlight. And once you keep going and you focus on that you will get out, you'll get out.
And again, it's like step one is the hardest part.
Yeah.
But once you can make it, then you're good to go. Just keep going.
Exactly.
Keep being self-aware.
Again,
keep
on the road, like you've been driving to a destination, and the road is foggy and it's raining, and it's sometimes you can't continue. Sometimes you have to pull aside and you have to wait and you have to reassess and you have to say, you know what? Okay, now I'm able to go back onto the road and take it. People are so hard on themselves, and that's the hard part where you're like sometimes you feel alone. I was very much like that, where it's like, oh, well, I didn't do this, and I didn't do that, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. Instead of just, like, admitting that I didn't do these things and just accepting it and saying, what can I do to do these things? Instead, I was like, I give up. I'm just going to drink.
Yeah.
It's just so much easier to do that way.
Because it's so simple, yeah.
So simple.
It's one of those things where it's like, if alcohol didn't, like, create a Jekyll and Hyde persona out of me, and if health-wise alcohol didn't kill you, it just let you have fun, I'd do it forever.
Yes.
I'd do it
Oh
forever.
my God.
But we don't live in that dream world. It's we live in reality where it hurts you, and also it takes over your mind. You don't get control. So it's like even what I just said. If it didn't do Jekyll and Hyde, and if it didn't kill my health, I'd keep doing it. But it's like, but that want wouldn't go away, and so it would still take over my life, even if those other conditions weren't a problem, even if it wasn't going to physically kill me and all this other stuff. So it's like the fact that I would still want it to this day, and like it just goes to show the power that it can actually have over someone, right? Where it's like it's like a toxic relationship. You just have to end it.
Yeah.
You have to, because that's what it is. It's literally a poison. It's a liquid
During
poison.
the toxic relationship, you're going back and you're going back. You keep getting burned. You keep getting burned. You keep getting burned, but you still go back.
Yeah,
Until the
and it
one
just
time the
keeps
burn
hurting.
is just too much.
Yeah.
Like this burn really hurt this time, so it's like I'm done. And I think that's another great analogy where it's like people, you have to transform a little bit. You have to be broken down in order to like understand what you really want out of life sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's
and
hard.
that's just a bigger aspect of life itself, is that, a lot of the time it takes turmoil. Like, certain misguided parents have that philosophy that you need to break your kid down to build character out of them. And it's like, you don't intentionally do it, but that's, that philosophy in general is correct in a way where every person has an untapped potential. And all it takes is pressure to turn a coal into a diamond.
Exactly.
And so it's one of those elements where it does take pain to get there, but you would never wish that on someone. It's one of those very interesting things where it's like, I would never, I'm young, but I do have the intention to have kids at some point in my life, and I would never, ever want them to go through alcoholism, ever. But it's like, what if they end up being a bunch of spoiled brats or something, And it's like,
who knows?
It's
because
weird how that works, where it's like, you're so grateful for the experience that you had that made you the person today, but you would never wish for anyone else to experience that. So it's very weird to,
because that's where
that
I think
dual
a lot of things come into play, where like it's your strength and your inner strengths. And I think that some people are kind of meant to, like, for example, we're starting a podcast. We'll inspire somebody. If it inspire one person to just quit drinking and change their life, job done.
Yeah, if we make 100 episodes and we get one person to reassess or anything, that'd be amazing. Right? That would be a completely job well done. Yeah,
and
I'm so satisfied with that.
I think certain people have a special little something in them that we're meant to share these experiences with other people, so that it gives them that little bit of extra to help.
It can give them the confidence. Yeah. Especially living in Canada or America, wherever. Right, abroad in the eastern parts of the world. It's like just having anything out there to say that you're not alone, or to say that like to give any piece of advice, right? It's one of those things where they're like an AA podcast is very far and few between, which is very interesting that there isn't more, right? Because this topic is like millions upon millions of people the world over forever. Like, it's not going to go anywhere, right? Because it is a deep psychological problem. So it's not like if we make alcohol illegal or something, it will stop, right? It's like there will always be alcoholics. And and it's one of those things where it's like all we can do is help each other through this. That's the best way to do it. And the easiest way to do it is from one alcoholic to another, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like I'm still an alcoholic, right? Even though I'm a recovered one, it's like I still have that type of mind. So it's not like, oh, now I'm not an alcoholic, so I can drink again, right?
Oh, like, you know what? Like that, literally, like I love analogies with anything, and that is giving me like the perfect analogy of like how I kind of think of myself in an everyday world. So essentially, I've been thinking this since I quit, and I don't literally tell anyone, but I'm going to share this, is I play it off like I'm a vampire from one of those really, really cheesy teen like books.
Yeah.
Where like I see like blood pumping in like a human person's neck, because it's like that's how strong I need that rage, that juice. Yeah. And I see this with alcohol. So like if I'm out at parties or things like this and I see people drinking, I can literally smell it going down their like throat. I can see it off their lips. I can just like taste it. I can just, you know what I mean? So it's close. Almost like so it's almost like someone's it's almost like zooming in on someone's neck and then seeing the blood just pumping. Like I can literally see the veins. Yeah. And I know in my head that if I go and rip that person's neck apart, that won't be the best thing, because I will kill somebody. Like, you can't do that, and then everyone's gonna know you're a vampire, and then you gotta go. You gotta get staked or something, or you gotta run. So in my head, I'm just thinking, you can't just go and drink alcohol, because when you go and drink alcohol, bad things will happen, and then you could end up in jail, or you can end up dead. So let's think about it here. Yeah, really give yourself an analogy where you're able to change. It's the same thing like with, remember I was telling you about the Kill Bill thing. It's like you have to really think about what is going to change that for you, right? Like if you had to say, let's make $1 million, I have to make $1 million tomorrow. Yeah. It's probably not going to happen. But if you were to say, okay, your mom's life is at stake, you go and try to figure out a way.
Yeah, you'll do whatever it takes.
It changes the whole.
As you can. I mean, yeah.
It changes the whole aspect of everything.
Yeah, because that is a thing too, right? For people who are in denial or that maybe think, oh well, there are other people that are alcoholics and maybe I have a problem, but it's not as bad. It's like, why don't you just change that mindset to, no, the fact that I can even say that maybe I have a problem means I'm probably as bad as them. And this is life or death, and I need to stop right now. Yeah. You shouldn't take it so nonchalantly. It's like, this is literally your life that we're talking about. It's like, you gotta stop, my dude. There are other things that you can do, right? Because it's like, for me, everybody has their own hobbies, right? Mm-hmm. So I have writing that I started to do when I was an alcoholic, right? And so it was one of those things where I thought, would that go away if I stopped drinking? But it hasn't. It's like as part of my life as ever before. And it's like anytime
it's probably enhanced.
Yeah, and anytime I'm like bored, or anytime I have free time, or anytime I like have any kind of mild anxiety, it's like I always have something to go to. It's not drinking anymore, it's writing. It's like I can have a notepad on me or just use my phone and write notes or whatever, because I'll just have ideas that come to my head.
Oh yeah.
And it's like people can have other things, right? There's stamps, there's coin collecting, there's there's like watching sports. For tons of people, that's like a way to relax, right? So it's like instead of drinking and watching sports, it's like just watch sports, and that can be your outlet for stress. It doesn't have to be the drinking.
It doesn't have to be the drinking, and that's the hard gamble part, where it's like you think that you don't need those things, but you have to find inspiration in the smaller things. And I just even remember like being like when you hear motivation things and like, oh, be grateful, and know your worth. Those things were very confusing for me. Like you hear them so commonly out, and it's like you really have to experience things to know it. Like you need to like try not drinking to know what it feels like to experience a movie or a show or go to a theater and not be wasted. You to experience that, it gives you leverage to now evaluate where you want to be, who you want to be, and how you want to change things, right?
Yeah. And a lot of it too is whenever you think like, oh, like I don't have a problem and stuff, and then someone would say, okay, so go a month without drinking if you don't have a problem. And they go, oh, well, I can't do that.
It's like, what? It's like, I'm like smiling, like, are you crazy?
I don't need to because I don't have a problem. It's like, well, if you really didn't have a problem, you could do it, right? Because
exactly.
Nobody wants to not drink for a month, right? But if someone's saying you do it and then you keep and you're like insistently like no, then it's like you gotta realize that says something, that shows something. You gotta have that kind of self-awareness, yeah. Because for certain forms of art, whenever they try to express what hell might look like, or some form of hell, because there are other religions that have different versions of the torturous or the negative side of the afterlife.
Essentially just burning fire, essentially,
That's like the general one, is that it's like underground with fire and stuff. Yeah. But then it's also specifically like your own personal hell, right? It's like if you have a particular fear of this or something that's done to you. And for a lot of people, drinking is a way to escape. The same way that movies or sports or video games are, right? Anything, it's just escapism. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it becomes your serial escapism, when you can't stop and it becomes chronic, where it's like you're doing it every other day or you're like binging every single week and you can't just relax with it, it does a lot to show your own personal fears that you have that you're trying to escape by doing this. Because if you could just not do it and relax, then you would do that. But you don't, because you know either you'll have withdrawal or you'll just have like depression or anxiety when you go away from it. It's like your fear of experiencing those pains, you drinking, it has become your new hell and you just haven't even realized.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like the devil's so clever that it convinced everyone he doesn't exist or something. It's a line from Usual Suspects. And it's like, perfect. That's what alcoholism does. It is able to twist your mind into thinking that the other thing that you're scared of is the hell, and that it's the release, it's the heaven, or whatever. But really, that's the hell, is the drinking, because you're now enslaved to this thing, and you're constantly afraid of what's going to happen if you don't do it. You're constantly, anytime you have clarity, where you're like, maybe I won't drink, and then you get like shivers, and you're just like, I'm going to drink, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, it's one of those things where, in Western culture specifically, because it was taken over by the Spaniards first, and then the British and the French, right, all over North America. They brought with them the philosophy of like dominance and manifest destiny. And capitalism came with it, and capitalism is obviously so far the best type of structure a society can have, but there's no room for self-reflection in our type of society that we're currently living in, right? There are forms of it, like the New Wave philosophies that have been coming out of California and stuff, for rich people that have more time than other people who are working constantly.
Said it, though. You just said it right there. It's the time. That's where it is.
But it's like when you have no time and you live in a culture that's about consuming, and it doesn't propagate or give any kind of credence to being self-aware, then you don't do that. It creates this structure where you're in the fog, you're on the tracks, and you don't move.
It's like but I think I mentioned it to you that the dragon is biting dragon's tail. That's what you call it. It's essentially, think of it as, why do you think alcohol is legal? Yeah, it's meant to distract you from doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like, for instance, the moment I quit drinking is the day that I changed my life. 1 year, recovered, figured out what I wanted to do. That brought me clarity to be like, why the hell am I around all these crazy people that are just living like robots and consuming and consuming and consuming? Coming up to me, like even today, Boxing Day sales, like coming up to me being like, oh my God, $100. I got new socks, like say socks are $100. This is out of nowhere. I got socks for $100. They were regular $180. I saved $80.
Like, no, you didn't. You just lost $100.
You just spent $100.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's a reason, like, you know what I mean? That philosophy is what alcohol does. And I'm not saying that people that don't drink alcohol go and do that shit too. But in general, it's meant to make you think, oh, I'm so busy, or I don't have time to do this. I don't have. I'm sorry. I've been running my own business now. Don't have because I have time now to essentially focus on the objective, and those highs that I'm checking off my list are 10 times greater than the high that I was experiencing going through alcoholism.
Yeah. And same. I mean, alcoholism was like this giant weighted blanket I put on myself.
Oh my god. So
and
heavy.
and then that's
Wet,
it.
wet,
you just
cold.
succumb all of your control, and you're just like, there we go. And then you wake up, and it disappeared. And then you go off to work, and you're miserable. And then you come home, and then you throw away the blanket on you, and then you're good to go. And it's like, so now that I've gotten rid of that, because I'm just over 1 year sober now, and I always say that I'm not 1 year sober. Because I've still done other drugs, but I'm 1 year dry. That's the term I use.
1 year dry, okay.
Because it's like, yeah.
What would that be for me then? If I've never done any drugs, only
then
drank.
nothing, then sobriety.
But I do smoke weed. So what does that count?
Dry.
That's okay.
Dry.
I'm dry. Hey, yeah, I'm dry.
That's the term.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
But yeah, and not everybody can do that. For some people, it's any substance they have to quit, right? Because it's like for me. Weed it doesn't affect me. I don't feel great when I do it. I usually just get sleepy or anxious, right? The goal is the sleepy part, right? But it's like I don't actually get much out of it, so it doesn't. I don't love it the same way I did alcohol, so I know that I can do it because I'm not going to get addicted to this thing because it's not my best friend.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But then for other people, it will be, right? Weed happens to affect them the same way it affects Seth Rogen, so they have a great time every time they do it, and then so it could become a new addiction.
Exactly.
So it's like for some people it has to be pure sobriety, but for me it's like I can do other things.
It's the same thing with me
Still
for
alive.
like drugs. Like I cannot because originally how I started to get into alcoholism was essentially Oxycontin. That was the gateway, and then I quit that because I'm like I don't do any drugs or anything like that. That's not me.
Yeah.
But what
the
is?
drinking can be.
Yeah, the drinking is legal and like
socially
normal.
acceptable.
It's like yeah. So, boom.
That became
But we are kind of wrapping up on time.
Yes.
So
in our final moments, obviously, first
Mm-hmm.
we bring attention to step one, and how admitting that you have a problem is the most important step. So for anyone who's gone there but thinking, but now I can't go to AA because I'm too anxious, you don't have to.
you don't have to.
There are multiple different things you can do. I happen to like get excited about the idea of it because it was like I've always been curious because you hear about it in media and just in the world in general. And I have a couple uncles that go to AA. And
see, that's
so
great.
Like,
that's so awesome to hear because, like, for instance, you have that experience of like you have your uncles and like that. They give you that
I
trust.
had someone
Yeah,
to turn to.
exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And then so it's like for me, I had fun going to AA, but I know it's not for everyone. I mean, I stopped going. I'm still going to go back, but I didn't make it a regular part of my life because it just wasn't my scene. It wasn't, but it's like it can be in the future. And in general, it's an amazing, just giant group therapy session, and it's an amazing community that can keep people on the right track.
Yeah.
But yeah, admitting is the hardest part. And so if you've achieved that, or if in any way us talking about it has inspired you to maybe become self-reflect in some way, then of course that's all any of us could ever hope for, right? Is to try to live your best possible life.
And do it the best way you can, essentially. Like
Yeah, you don't have to quit your job just because you quit drinking,
like,
right?
You just have to
that's what we happen to do.
Works for you, essentially, and like be inspired. Like just know that essentially you're not alone. Like there's people that can help you, and like for instance, like Joe's mentioning that like AA is great. So now that I have now made a new connection, I can maybe now go to AA with him, and that's now
together,
exactly one new way that we can. Like I'm now experiencing something new and learning something new, but somebody who's maybe fearful of going to AA to begin with, just know that you don't have to do that in order to get the same results we have, because we took two separate roads and two separate paths, and we met in the same place, essentially. And that's where I think why we started this podcast is because Joe and I met one day, literally, and sat and talked for almost an hour just about one topic.
Yeah,
this topic.
We never could have imagined that we'd both be like, oh, we're both recovering.
It's just a connection right away, right? So you just never know who you're going to hear, who you're going to meet, and who you're going to connect with. So always keep an open mind and just look up for information. It's out there because I found it. I literally just looked. YouTube, there's places. TED Talks, you can figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we bring this first episode to a close, obviously we want to direct you guys to both of our contacts. So on social media, I am at thejoevan.com, D-O-T. And then I also have my website, which is thejoevan.com.
I'm on Instagram at Magic Cat Mentors. So, you know, I do all my social media stuff on there. Follow me on there. I'm going to be starting up a YouTube soon, so I'll get that in there too. But, you know, the more the better.
The more the better, the more the merrier. We're filming this in the end of 2019, but it will be releasing in 2020. So
hello.
As this new year begins, we say hello to you. New year, new decade, new you. And we will see you guys next time.
Yeah, take it easy.